Welcome to everyone. We're grateful that you're here. We'll give it another minute and see if others join us as they're logging in. Hi, Tracy, in the car. Good to hear you're not driving, Tracy. Sandra, any more in the waiting room?
None right now.
Okay, we'll go ahead and get started then. So welcome to everyone to the College of Education Dean's Forum. This is volume 4. We do this each semester. It's a great way to learn what's happening with our faculty in the college, and we have some awesome scholars with us tonight. We're grateful for your presence and your commitment to the College of Education. Thank you for spending time with us to learn about our work and our impact. A few housekeeping items before we get started. All participants are muted to start us off tonight. When we get to the interactive session, you'll be able to ask questions of our scholars. Feel free to put your cameras on if you're comfortable during that part of the session. Rather than providing questions in the chat, we're going to provide a link for you to submit questions on a Google Doc, so it'll be anonymous. This event is being recorded and will be made available on the College of Education's Dean's Forum page. And finally, you'll be emailed a brief survey a couple days after tonight's event, and we encourage you to let us know your thoughts about tonight's topic and also ideas about future forums. So thanks for playing tonight. When we started working, and thinking about these forums, we made a decision to focus these last 3 on our values. So there was a 2-year process that the college went through with our faculty and staff to refine our mission, vision, and values. And so our mission is to transform education to advance justice and liberation. Our vision is a world where education fosters human flourishing, and our values are hope, engagement, and justice. So our previous volumes 1 through 3 are on the Dean's Forum page, and the last 2 have focused on hope and engagement, and tonight we focus on justice. So very excited about this topic. So welcome to the conversation about justice with Dr. Danny Bernard Martin, who's a professor in curriculum instruction and also our Department of Mathematics. He's a joint appointment. With Dr. Decoteau J, Irby, who's an associate professor in educational policy studies, and Dr. Terrell Morton, who's an assistant professor in educational psychology. I'm going to start by talking a little bit about their awards this year. So all of them were 2024 national awardees. Dr. Martin received the distinction of an AERA Fellow. It's a cohort this year of 24, and it's the most respected scholars that are in AERA's organization, and it was great to be here to see him get this award. And Dr. Terrell Morton, he was awarded the National Association for Research and Science Teaching, NARST, 2024 Early Career Research Award. And Dr. Irby was awarded the AERA Leadership for Social Justice SIG Bridge People Award. So I know you're gonna love learning from them tonight. So we'll start with Dr. Martin. And I'm just gonna go over a brief bio for the 3 of them, and then we're gonna start our questions to get us started off tonight. So Dr. Danny Martin has a joint appointment serving as both a professor of education and a professor of mathematics. He also served as department chair for a number of years in curriculum and instruction. Are you checking on the slides here, Sandra? Yep, everybody can see. Okay. He teaches mathematics content courses in the mathematics department, as well as methods courses in the undergraduate elementary education program, and courses in our PhD program in mathematics and science education in the College of Education. Dr. Morton's research has focused on understanding the salience of race and identity in Black learners' mathematical experiences. His work is antithetical to perspectives that attempt to fix or repair Black learners. His work suggests that we cannot reform mathematics education without considering its symbiotic relationships with white supremacy, anti-Blackness, and racial capitalism. New forms of math education worthy of Black children are needed. His research has spanned middle school, high school, community college, and university context, and focused on Black students, parents, and families. Dr. Morton is author of the book Mathematical Success and Failure Among African Youth, co-author of The Impact of Identity in K-8 Mathematics, Learning and Teaching, editor of Mathematics Teaching, Learning, and Liberation in the Lives of Black Children, and co-editor of The Brilliance of Black Children in Mathematics, Beyond the Numbers and Toward New Discourse. So welcome to Dr. Morton. Dr. Irby is an associate professor in the Department of Educational Policy Studies, where he teaches and advises in the college's Urban Education Leadership EDD program. Dr. Irby's research explores how equity-focused school leadership can be used as a lever to improve Black children and youth's academic achievement and socio-emotional well-being across a range of K-12 educational settings. Specifically, he is interested in how adults make sense of and use their personal and collective influence and resources to transform educational spaces to benefit students of color. He's a highly sought-after thought leader and consultant who focuses on developing the capacity of leaders to use racial equity leadership to improve schools. In 2019, he was awarded a Spencer Large Grant to study district-level racial equity leadership and how equity leadership practices are institutionalized and sustained by the creation of equity offices. Most recently, he was recognized with the 2024 UIC Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Faculty Award. He's the third on our campus to receive that award for his leadership and advocacy in making UIC a welcoming and inclusive place. He is the author of Stuck Improving Racial Equity and School Leadership, and the forthcoming book, The Work of Equity Leadership for Justice and Systems Change, and serves on the editorial board for the Journal of Research and Leadership Education, an educational researcher. I'm going to talk a little bit more about Magical Black Tears, a protest story, another book he's written in a little bit. Welcome to Dr. Irby. Dr. Morton is an assistant professor of identity and justice in STEM education in the Department of Educational Psychology. I know that scholars in the country ask him, how did you get that title? And so I know he loves that title. Dr. Morton identifies as a scholar activist. His research and work focus on identity as it informs the decision-making processes of Black students in post-secondary STEM education. He draws from critical race theory and human development to examine how Black students define, understand, and operationalize what it means to be Black in relation to their STEM engagement. As a scholar activist, Dr. Morton works to transform the social and political positioning and understanding of Blackness in mainstream education, specifically STEM. He advocates for identity, justice, and joy to be fundamental for education. He also works to transform the culture of STEM such that STEM learning environments function as educational spaces that are recognized and understood as extensions of students' identities rather than sites of oppression. Dr. Morton currently leads 2 grants from the National Science Foundation totaling $9.9 million, examining Blackness in post-secondary STEM education through a multidimensional multiplicative lens, aka Black epistemologies, and deepening and expanding the mission and outcome of the Revisioning Culture Network, aka the REC Network. So welcome to Dr. Morton. So we're going to get started with this conversation tonight. I'm going to have Sandra. Welcome to those of you who have joined us. And we're going to wait until we see everybody on screen here. She's got? They're spotlighted? Okay. So if you are in Zoom and you select under View Speaker, then you'll see the 4 of us rather than the gallery view. So we're going to start with the first question for all 3 of you. How have your backgrounds influenced why you do justice-oriented work? And Dr. Morton, we're going to start off with you. How would you answer that question? I'll read it to you again. How have your backgrounds influenced why you do justice-oriented work?
Thank you so much, Dean Chval, for the question and the invitation. Everyone can hear me okay, right? Perfect. Well, first, before I answer the question, I am excited to be here on this day speaking to such a prestigious audience. I have mentors and mentees in the crowd, so that is super exciting to see. And I get to share the platform with these two amazing critical scholars whose work influences my own. So that is also super exciting for me. As I think about this question about my background and how it has influenced my pursuit of justice, I have to think about my family. So I'm originally from Asheville, North Carolina, born and raised in the mountains. And I grew up in a multi-generational household. So my grandparents, my mom, uncle, myself, my two siblings, and then my cousins were all in the same household. My grandparents were civil rights activists. My grandfather was pastor of a Baptist church for over 52 years in the South. Grandmother was a special education and home economics teacher. So yeah, she taught home economics before actually moving to the district. And they were very active in trying to dismantle sites of oppression, particularly racism, in the Asheville, North Carolina area. Some of the claims to fame include being on the lawsuit that forced desegregation of Asheville city school systems, as well as being among the group to start protesting around the Woolworths lunch counters and the unfair employment crises that were happening with the Winn-Dixie grocery store, particularly around Black folks in Asheville. And so this sense of activism was very much fundamental to how they raised my parents, which was very much influencing how we were then raised growing up in that same household. And this desire to give back to my community and this desire to really transform systems and structures in ways that allow people to exist and operate freely within these lands that we currently call the United States has been deeply ingrained in just who I am and how I understand myself. And so as I entered into STEM, I initially pursued that career because I wanted to be able to help and heal my community. You know, I could either be a doctor, a pastor, or a teacher. And at the time, I was like, I want to be a doctor. Because that was going to allow me to do the work that I was most passionate about. But while I was in STEM, particularly in a PhD program in Florida, I realized the grave injustices that were happening against Black students in the K-12 system. And it wasn't something that I could just sit by and just watch happening. So that really drove me to then go into higher education, pursue a PhD in the learning sciences with an emphasis on Black identity through these critical strengths-based approaches. And I can go on and on from there, including reading Dr. Martin's work, Dr. McGee's work, and others, but I'll stop for now. And I don't know if any of my panelists have similar stories or backgrounds.
Yeah, I said I can jump in here. Again, I want to echo the appreciation for this invitation. In particular, it's not lost on me that I get to be on this call with two Black male colleagues. A lot of people around the country can't say that they can do that, and it's one of the things that I appreciate. And a little hint that UIC would be a place that might have a commitment to justice is the number of men of color that are on the faculty in college education. So I want to acknowledge that. I think that this is not a typical thing. I also grew up in the South. I didn't grow up in a family that was particularly engaged in any kind of political kind of, engagement. I grew up my household was pretty apolitical. I mean, people voted. But I think that I really gained a sense of justice, but probably more early, like injustice from many of my schooling experiences. I lived in a predominantly Black, almost all Black working class, poor neighborhood community. I went to private Christian schools in elementary. I went to a Catholic school where I was one of the few Black children, and it was not the best experience. So a lot of, in my formative years of schooling, I spent a lot of time trying to process and ask questions about why I was experiencing what I was experiencing. I knew the feeling and the experience. I didn't necessarily have the words to accompany what I was experiencing at the time. but I also understood that my mother and the folks in my family were doing the best that they could to provide a kind of educational opportunity to me that wasn't available in my neighborhood, which I eventually did end up going to neighborhood public schools. But I mean, I think that I just came into the ideas of justice primarily really through hip hop and church. Those were the two places that, I mean, through the week I would be with my friends. We'd listen to NWA and Ice Cube. And then I go to church and we sing hymns about freedom, right? I also went to a very traditional kind of Black Baptist church where Sunday school was intertwined with Black history. The two were pretty much inseparable. So those were kind of like the two elements that really shaped a lot of the three elements: school, my community and working class family that I grew up in, where I saw a lot of strong, self-determined people. And then, youth culture and hip hop was really big. This is where I started to gain access to a lot of ideas about, justice, liberation, freedom, from, Tribe Called Quest and NWA. I could just name all of the people who I was like really soaking up all the lyrics and trying to make sense of like what they were talking about. So those are some of the kind of early things that kind of shaped my sense of justice. I got into education when I moved to Philadelphia. I majored in economics as an undergrad, and I moved to Philly thinking I would be a community developer, like working to empower Black communities. I ended up volunteering to teach. This always ages me a little bit, but to teach young people how to use email accounts. At the time, mostly only college students used email. And so I started working with young people and their families to help them learn how to use email accounts. And ended up just working in a lot of different youth serving spaces. And this sense of injustice started to kind of well up back for me when I saw how brilliant these young people were, how capable they were. And I also started to see how much and knew how much their families wanted them to have access to college specifically, but to life opportunities more broadly. But a lot of them, even when they did everything that they were supposed to do, like textbook, get this in, do this, take this test, go to this program to study, the system still never really worked out for them. And that's what made me become interested in urban education. I went back and got my PhD to begin to study how school systems need to be reformed to be places I eventually learned they need to be transformed to be places that support Black children and families. So.
I think that's me next. Good evening, everybody. And I want to echo the comments of my two colleagues here. It's a pleasure to be here in our company. Thank you to the Dean for inviting me to do this. I'm going to twist the question just a little bit. I'm going to give you the how, but also the why. My work focuses on Black children, families, and communities. I'm Black and I love Black people, right? It relates to both my professional and personal story, my family story. My parents are still alive. My father is 84. My mother is 80. And I think throughout my educational experiences, elementary, middle school, high school, college, graduate school, I've always kept in the back of my mind the kind of lives that they've led, kind of opportunities that they have had and, been blocked from. One of my parents is very vocal about it, my mother. My father is very silent. And I know that their stories, continue to sort of drive and motivate me. I'm doing things that they may or may not understand in terms of, having a PhD and, being at a university. And I'm very cognizant of the fact that although they may have a partial understanding, I'm not here without them. Right? I'm not here without them. And so my sense of justice has always been linked to not just my own needs, but experiences, but their experiences. And, as a researcher, I find and have found that love that I express for Black people has not always been present in research, especially in my area, math education, where Black children are just characterized in all kinds of negative and deficit ways. And it's not something that has sat well with me. I've tried to do the little bit that I can in little bitty spaces that I operate in to continue to love my people, right? No matter what anybody else says or does, and do it the best way that I can. In addition to my two parents, in terms of looking back over their lives, I have an 11-year-old son. And so people who know me, some people on the attendance here know that I'm sort of overly consumed about him and his future. I'm glad to say that whatever I have done in terms of my interactions with him, he is a very just-oriented little boy, right? And I want him to stay that way. And I want him to, long after I'm gone, to go and continue forth with that particular attitude. And so whatever I can do in terms of my research, my parenting, being a good son, that is what's motivated me to sort of do the work that I do.
If I could jump in right quick, something that you said, Danny, made me think of two things. So my grandmother, she used to tell us this phrase, I am loved and cared for. And it was her way of reminding my siblings, even parents and I, that no matter who a person is, where they come from, particularly those who have been historically and contemporarily oppressed, she might not have said it in that capacity, but I'm gonna add that little academic part to it.
Right.
That we have to remind ourselves and others that we are loved and cared for, and that love sentiment can really drive, why we do and what we do when it comes to the justice-oriented work. And I later found out that my grandmother remixed this allegory, I Am Lovable and Capable, which is actually a book that was written that she was learning during her own educational time. And that pedagogy or philosophy of IALAC, as we were taught, is something that really stands out to me. And I heard that in your sentiment as you just talked about the love that you experienced from your parents, but the love that you give to your own son and how that shows then through your intentionality in the work. And yeah, it kind of resonated with me.
And I'll just add one other thing. I've become more reflective over the last several years. And when I talk, in a recent talk, I said something about my parents that I hadn't said before, but I knew it was always true. I was reflecting on the idea that I have a PhD, which it's a good thing. But I told the audience, I said, my parents are 1884, and they have PhDs in life, right? They have PhDs in life that really matter, right? Making something out of a little bit of nothing, right? My mom, my mom, I'll just say my mom, raised 4 children, university professor, a nurse, a school paraprofessional, an entrepreneur, right? Without a high school diploma with a middle school education. And that's not to, put her on blast or anything. That's what she was able to do. But she has a PhD in life. And that's really, really, really important. And my father has a PhD in life in his own way, right? So those PhDs are much more valuable than the ones that I could sort of, attach to my name in terms of letters and degrees and certificates. It's a really important thing that allows me to do what I do. But as the young folks would say, I have to always keep it real and remember that, they got me here, right? They got me here. And other people too, but they got me here for sure.
Well, thanks so much. As you were talking, what I was thinking about is, how many times do we go to work and we interact with people and we never know their stories. We never even ask their stories. So, thanks for sharing on a video here. But, it's just, I could just listen to you all talk about your families and the influences that you've had. So appreciate that. So that was kind of, the past and a little bit, we're going to think about the present now. So how do you pursue justice within your work, considering the investments and the risks associated with it? And let's start with Dr. Irby this time.
Yeah, thank you. So, I'm in educational policy studies. Most of my teaching and research focuses on school leaders. And so I think about leadership with school leaders, but leadership more broadly as the primary place where I'm always working to try to, advance justice. if we think about leadership, I really tend to think of it as a set of practices that groups of people engage in together. And so I'm really curious about how people, engage and move justice forward, whether that's leading a protest, whether it's leading the design of a curriculum that's going to support students. All of these different things are like really important. I think some of the values that I try to bring to how I engage in the pursuit of justice, some things that have kind of sort of been mentioned here. Love. I try to be loving. I try to be kind. I don't necessarily try to be nice to everyone, but I try really to be a very kind person. So even if I'm direct, it may not necessarily be nice. In fact, a lot of people who don't, until they get to know me, they think I'm very, very serious person. And then once you get to know me, I'm like, I am sometimes, but not always. I have a sense of humor. I laugh, I smile, all that kind of stuff. But I think part of it is, I think with those values in mind and with the leaders who I work with and in the spaces that I work, I feel like this idea of trying to speaking the truth is really an important aspect of like justice work. And that's whether I encounter students whose writing skills aren't where they should be, and being very truthful with them about that, but also being willing to provide the kind of supports and resources to get them to where they need to be. So something is as small as helping someone improve, their academic writing, to having a conversation with a principal who isn't doing what they need to do to support the students in their building. All of those things are driven by a commitment to leveraging and using truth as the resource, and trying to be as truthful as possible, and trying to use that as the resource to actually advance justice. So I remember I was having a conversation once with a good friend of mine about my book, Stuck Improving. And he asked me about, and I had some anxieties about the book because it doesn't speak necessarily to critical race audience or a audience. It kind of like intersects at critical race theory and improvement science, and those things have some serious tensions, right? Like critical race theorists aren't talking about continuous improvement. But as I was talking to my friend, his name is Matthew Burkhole, I told him that I was able to write the book because I stopped trying to write to an audience, and I started trying to write a book that was the most truthful and honest that I could possibly write. And once I started focusing on writing what was truthful and honest, I just had to let it go. And once I let it go, it was, people received it in a number of different ways, but it was as close to the truth as I could get. And I feel like in terms of my research and my teaching, my work and my practice is always to try to work in pursuit of understanding and identifying what's true in the truth, and then being able to articulate and use that as a resource to advance justice.
Yeah, I think I'm up next. So this is more of the how question, how we pursue justice. I've been teaching math for 37 years, doing educational research for 34. That's a long time. And I spent most of that time in terms of the research and also the teaching with one real pursuit, is to reframe how we talk and think about Black children, families, and communities in math education, right? Looking at the old dominant narratives and stereotypes about what we can and can't do individually and collectively as a people, and really trying to create new narratives that are really just, humane, Black affirming in terms of identity, individual, collective. And some of you know that one of my reframings has to do with the brilliance of Black children, right? I believe that. I don't question it. For me, in terms of mathematical terms, it's axiomatic, right? It's given, it's fundamental, it's foundational, doesn't require proof, right? But people don't believe that. People don't believe that. They've questioned that. And so my work has been ongoing to kind of keep that message and keep that narrative, moving forward, because I know people don't believe it. I think one way to not prove it, but to give weight to it and heft to it, is myself and others like Dr. McGee here in the audience. We focus on the stories, not just the stories, but the stories of Black people and their experiences in terms of socialization and identity. And that's a very powerful thing, right? To have people tell you what happened to them or what they experienced in math class, 15, 20 years ago, or 2 years ago, or this semester. Very powerful stories where some of that love that we mentioned has been absent, and sometimes it's very present in terms of resilience and support. I think the other thing I could say in terms of that longevity, what I've been doing is I'm more interested in Black learners' liberation over their commodification. So I'm not interested in how many Black engineers we can make. Some people are interested in that. That's great, right? Because the engineering that they do is in an anti-Black context, right? We live in a country where Black people's talents and abilities are always under question anyway, right? And that's not liberating to send people off to spaces where, it's not kind and it's not humane. I'm not going to discount that people want to go in those spaces to make a living. They got to eat, they got to pay bills, but that's not my goal. I want to help empower people and work with people to empower themselves in ways that they can actualize whatever they want to actualize in life. But I've moved away, even if I was maybe at one point in my career leading in that direction, leaned away from this idea of commodifying Black people to satisfy other people's goals, right? I'm interested in self-determination. I can't say that I've figured that out, but I think that's really important in terms of listening to people back in those stories and what they want, encountering the narratives that we don't want to hear and that we know exist. So yeah, liberation over commodification all day, every day, right? For me. And I try to do that in my speaking, my writing, my teaching. I'll give you a really quick example of how those things can travel. I've often had people who have never met me, but they've met me through my writing. They've never met me in person. And when they meet me in person, they typically say, the people who do this, they say, wow, I thought you were going to be 6 foot, 400, 500 pounds because your writing is so heavy and powerful. I thought you were this big, mean, angry guy. It's like, no, I'm just speaking my truth. And if it comes across as heavy and you perceive me as coming across, then, I managed to do what I wanted to do, because I'm not going to, like Decoteau said, I'm not going to hold back. I'm not going to bite my tongue. I'm not going to stutter. I'm just going to say what I have to say across all the experiences that I've mentioned.
So I was definitely a wower. I didn't necessarily think that Dr. Morton was 600 pounds, but when I got to UIC, I was like, wait, I could just walk down to his office and talk to him? Like, oh no, let me go ahead and get this popping now. Because as I had mentioned earlier, a lot of his work, and as he also mentioned, Ebony McGee's work, have been foundational to my work as somebody also very much interested in Black liberation within the context and through the context of STEM education. But I think for me, one of the things, well, not one, but some of the things that I think about when I see how my work pursues justice is kind of multifold. So I think about what STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, both as individual disciplines and this new interdisciplinary amorphous concept that we put together as a result of the innovations that can come out of it, actually represents both globally and within the context of these lands that we currently call the United States. And I think about the investments and the resources and the opportunities and the access that we as a society have put into these spaces. And to quote Dr. McGee in some aspects, I think about how the knowledge that has come with the innovations and the innovations themselves that are associated with those disciplines and domains have been often used to reify oppression in ways, as we think about sort of the militaristic outcomes that come with a lot of the STEM innovations, and even some of the politicized outcomes that come with the STEM innovations. But then on the flip side, when she talked about, Jetsons and the flying cars in her book, I think about the possibilities that can come out of STEM innovations, and not just STEM as we define it in our classroom spaces or in our formal education spaces, But I'll never forget, I was playing football in middle school, 4 foot something, so I had no business on the football field. And I stepped on an in-ground wasp's nest and got stung like over 30 times. I didn't realize I was stung until I saw the wasp like climbing in my arms. And obviously shock and everything else took place. But when I got to my grandmother, before we could even get to the hospital, she went into the kitchen and grabbed things. I wish I knew what she grabbed to this day, but she grabbed things that really created this mix, and she put this paste all over my arms. Within minutes, the itching and the burning was gone. The stingers were coming out. And it was just like, again, that life knowledge, as Dr. Morton and Dr. Irby talked about, was very much a chemical reaction that helped reduce the pain and the swelling, yet and still is not recognized even to this day as chemistry. So I think about like the possibilities that can come out of STEM innovation. And so I really see my work as taking like this reparative approach. If we have access to these resources, to these spaces, to these opportunities that can facilitate transformative change for the lives of the people that I value and the communities that I come from, how can I stand in that gap to really help repair, and not necessarily repair as in I have the answers and I'm the savior of this space, but facilitate. I almost said something, but I'm not going to say it because it's in a recording. Facilitate access by which we are able to diverge some of these resources into community spaces to really help and get into that liberatory and emancipatory outcomes through innovations and opportunities that people do on a day-to-day basis that aren't always formally recognized. So that's one way in which I really see like a culmination of my pursuit of grants, my research, my writing, my activities, really trying to put resources and opportunities in the hands of communities who have been doing phenomenal innovation since the beginning of time, but whose histories and legacies and ideals have been stripped away from them. I also see myself engaging justice in my work through joy. As a Black man navigating the STEM space in my past life and the STEM education and even professional space now in my current life, note that whenever we say Black, particularly within this country, there are always these deficit, derogatory, dark assumptions that are created with this connection of the term Black. And for me, it's like Blackness is more than the trauma and the oppression that we have experienced. Black people have more to contribute to the narrative and the stories of the world than the transatlantic slave trade or Jim Crow or the school to prison pipeline of the prison industrial complex. Yet and still, these are always the associations that we tend to psychologically develop when we think about Blackness in these spaces. And so from that reparative space, how do I help repair or even reclaim the love and the laughter and the joy and the food and the culture and the music that we also contribute to these spaces and to the world more broadly? So I do that through my research by intentionally reaching out to those Black students who may not necessarily be looked at as the researcher. And it's like, no, actually, you have a lot to contribute to this through your life experience. Come, let's work together and let's do some phenomenal things. And in the process of studying the heaviness of critical race theory and Afro-pessimism and Black crit and all of these other frameworks, we're also going to throw on Tamia and start doing the line dance, which we actually just did in my training back in Austin. You can see it on our video. You can see our video on our social media because there's elements and aspects of joy to just how we exist as Black people, as human beings in this space. So I see my act of justice by also showing up as a joyful person, recognizing that joy comes as a result of oppression and trauma and pain. I almost broke out singing Joy and Pain, Sunshine and Rain, but I'll save that for a little later.
R.I.P. Frankie Beverly. Gosh. You know, that's I just had when you said joy and pain, that just took me back to United Center on his farewell tour. Talking about somebody who contributed some joy. But anyway.
Well, Dr. Ebony here is suggesting you sing that, Terrell. So if you're seeing the chat, hello, Dr. McGee. Well, thanks for sharing that. That was phenomenal. And I think in volume 5, we're going to need to have some singing components. So we'll do one last question before we have the opportunity for the audience to ask some questions. But we talked about the past and the present, and I'd like you to dream big and think about the future a little bit. So what are your freedom dreams as it pertains to your pursuits of justice? And and I could ask the second one if you're interested. And what institutional resources would you desire to support your work and education towards obtaining your freedom dreams? I think I'm going to start with Dr. Morton on this one.
Yeah, we talked about this a couple of days ago. So I'll flip the words a little bit and say that my freedom dream, my immediate freedom dream, and being very selfish for myself, is for my 11-year-old son to be free to dream, right? I want him to be free. In all the ways that that's going to be important for him in his life moving forward. I just want him to be free to dream, to just do what he wants to do in the world. And I know that, on the second part of that question, as I mentioned a couple of days ago, there's probably no amount of money that can make that happen, right? In terms of monetary, right? We have to be able to change the world in different ways. And sometimes it's monetary, sometimes it's not. But that's kind of my selfish dream for him. But also, I think that's true for what I want for, I know that's true in terms of what I want for other people's children. They're 11-year-olds, right? I want those children to be able to dream and be free. And we just live in a world where that's not happening for a lot of children, right? We have children right now who are experiencing horrible traumas. And I give a nod to the joy aspect, but we can turn on the TV and we see children all bloodied up from who knows what, right? Here and abroad. That doesn't bode well for the future, right? It doesn't bode well for the future because those children will have to carry that with them. They don't get to experience childhood in the ways that we say that we want them to experience it. So I want him to maintain his just orientation. I want him to be concerned about the other children that he sees. And I hope that he will go out and do in the world. Institutionally, because we got to bring it back home. We have a lot of smart people in this building, on this campus, in this city, across the nation. And more locally, I just wonder how we can kind of tear down our silos and come together. So here's a concrete thing. I'd love for the College of Ed, together with the College of Social Work, Medicine, Public Policy, Black Studies, to have a center for the study of Black life, right? Where it's not just about academics patting themselves on the back and coming together. I mean, we really take up some serious problems that are confronting Black people and Black communities. And that's not being selfish. It's just being realistic in terms of, my wishes. And being pro-Black doesn't mean I'm anti any other group. So let's just be clear about that. But I really like to see us have a Center for the Study of Black Life where we come together in intentional ways across those different domains and think about children, families, and communities and their needs. And I know people are doing different things on campus, but sometimes you need a hub, you need a house, right? You need a house and you need rules for that house. You need to be able to invite people into that house and do different things. So I'd love to see that and be involved in something like that. And no disrespect or minimizing the other kinds of efforts that we have on campus, but that's very explicit. That's very explicit. It tells you what we're about, right? The Center for the Study of Black Life. And that includes the medical needs, the emotional, educational, occupational, all that. So I could see how all of us in this room, for example, could be coming together with our different interests, the policy considerations, right? Whether it's STEM in terms of disciplinary aspirations or something else. Yeah. So maybe we can get that to happen. Yeah. Your priorities and your budgets have to match. So if we make that a priority, maybe we'll get some budgets for it.
That's right. Love that
Mhm.
idea. And I'm seeing the comments come in. A lot of people love that idea. So thank you. Terrell.
When you all told me to sing, it just started to trigger my musical portion of my mind, which is all over because there are no sides, people. The brain talks on both sides. But when Dr. Martin was talking about, his son to be free, I went to Old Freedom that I learned in the church. And then I mixed it with Denise Williams's Free. And then I ended up landing in Beyonce's Freedom, Freedom, I Can't Move. So now we got a whole freedom playlist that we can put out there that has a little bit of gospel, has a little bit of old school, and a little bit of contemporary. And then he really hit me when he said, you can have a house, because I immediately went to Lufa and just started singing A House Is Not a Home in my head. So I might need the question again because
I will read the question again. Your
We're
question
listing a new
is,
center. Yeah.
dream big. What
Mhm.
are your freedom dreams as it pertains to your pursuits of justice? And what institutional resources would you desire to support your work in education towards obtaining your freedom dreams?
So as somebody who has, and I mean, whose work is very much connected to psychology, and I think about like that decision-making process for Black students in STEM, one of the things that I've always seen in research, not just my work, but research in general, is this emphasis on how they are persisting and what's contributing to their persistence. And so we're looking psychologically at all of these factors, all of these resources, internal and external, motivating factors to support persistence. And I've always wondered, like, why is it that Black folks have to be persistent or have to be resilient or be resistant or be gritty? Like, how can we not just be? So my freedom dream, I think, is the space and opportunity for Black people to just be. And within the context of STEM education, that's being able to bring in that knowledge that my grandmother and other people's grandmothers have around understanding the natural world and chemistry, or the quote unquote shade tree mechanic, or every other euphemism that we used to name that in engineering. Or even the mathematics that is associated with just understanding life. What does that look like in allowing us to just be as we dream and understand and engage the world? Resource-wise, I am a person who loves windows, and I am a person who loves the opportunity for the sun to come in, to shine down and bring great joy as I am trying to be within my research space. And so it would be amazing if, to Dr. Martin's point, if we actually had the space by which we could be in community with one another as we are collectively thinking through these ideas, with lots of sunshine to help support the melanin that's within our skins that we need to be successful. What does open collaborative space with the technologies to allow for lots of collaborative engagement, both here in the Chicagoland, but externally, recognizing that I have a lot of colleagues that I work with that aren't based in Chicago? How do we have that virtual communication where I'm not limited to just my laptop or my desktop, but I have this whole Iron Man whiteboard, and I can bring all of these things and all of these people and all of these ideas together while we're also connecting and collaborating and strategizing what we want our beingness to look like. I also think too, in terms of institutional resources, how are we intentional in really trying to, Dr. Martin said de-silo, so I'm gonna borrow that, not just de-silo our engagements, but de-silo our understandings of what counts as knowledge when it comes to doing and engaging in this space. And so one of my exciting things that I've been thinking about, haven't had a chance to work towards, but hopefully get the opportunity to, is who are those community, quote unquote, masters of trade that have such deep institutional knowledge of life that need to be very much brought into or a part of our learning complex and spaces in higher ed? How are they appropriately compensated for that knowledge? And then what becomes that collaboration between these masters of life and the learners if we're thinking about that apprenticeship model that we often have in education. So finding ways to de-silo knowledge construction, generation, dissemination beyond just academic writing, but also within our learning spaces and our classes that we teach here, so that others can just be and enjoy and sing and dance and do great scholarship and work as well.
Thank you, Dr. Morton. For those of you on this or watching this after the fact, Dr. Morton, I believe, is referring to our building on the UIC campus. And I think when I got here, the first request I got is, can you get us a new building? That's collaborative and innovative, and it brings people together. So thanks for throwing that big dream out there. So I'm with you. Let's see, there are a number of questions that have come in, and I know we're running out of time. So let's see, Professor Luna Duarte, I see your class there. Can they see us? Raise your hands if you're all there. Am I seeing hands? All right, there they are. We have one of our higher ed classes. And so I'm going to first start with a question that has been asked about. Can you share the beautiful moments as you're doing your work? So I've heard these other things, other suggestions about tonight, and you're taking risks. You're doing really hard work. You're doing emotional work. You're doing human work. You know, some people out there I know on this call need some encouragement. They're feeling the heaviness. And can you give us a beautiful moment that you've experienced as you've taken on this work of justice? I'll throw it out to anybody who's willing to start us off on that.
I will volunteer Dr. Irby because I don't know if we got his freedom dream either.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, well,
It is to finish,
thank
right?
you. Yeah, I echo the building piece. Anybody who knows me, who's been in a meeting with me, every year since I've been here, I would say we need a new building. Every year. And we can't get a new one, we need to tear some walls down and make open communal spaces. I think the spaces are a really important thing. Also, I echo, you know, what you all were saying, a place where, you know, I guess my freedom dream for young people, for Black children in particular, is that they live in a society where they have the opportunities to make mistakes and fail. It's a very human thing. And one of the ways that I think about what I'm working to try to create, the conditions I'm trying to create, is a condition where my son, my daughter, other children can make mistakes, and those mistakes don't cost them their lives, their educational opportunities, all those sorts of things. And when I look around, these are the kinds of opportunities that a lot of other, you know, groups have, folks have, is the opportunity to make mistakes, to take risks, so on and so forth. I think one other thing that I would add on the dream big side would be more of a recognition of imagination, and more of a recognition around what our work could look like outside of these walls. Because, you know, one of the things that I try to help people understand is that if you only see me at UIC, you really haven't seen much. Because I'm thriving and I'm doing my best work when I'm in my community with people. And so, you know, I always say, like, you know, I try to do my best, but there's only so much I can do in this place that has, you know, particular kind of constraints. And so I think part of it is to try to figure out how to think about scholarship and academia in a way that taps into and learns from what I do when I'm in my best spaces, you know. And I think about children, they'd be like, well, this, you know, I think about my son, for example. I'm like, you know, y'all have this narrow picture of him in this space. You should see this brother in life. So, you know, if y'all saw him in life, and sometimes he'll tell people to come, they come to baseball or they come to whatever, and they'd be like, wow, you know what I mean? And I'd be like, it's your institution that doesn't allow him to be that when he's in that space. So I'll say that's one of my big dreams, is for us to reimagine where and how we see people's the value and the work that they actually do and they bring. And then on the question of risk, you know, I always think of not risk by itself, but risks. And a lot of people do like this risks benefits kind of thing. I think of it as risk versus future, versus potential. And I don't know what the future could hold if I try to pursue justice. It could backfire on me. It could be something that's harmful. But I do know the current situation that I'm in, and I'm not satisfied with the current situation that I'm in and that Black people and Black children are in. And so for me, the possibilities outweigh the risk the possibilities of of what's possible. The future outweighs the current reality, because staying in this current reality is a risk. Like me, like I mentioned, we were talking about this the other day, like walking from point A to point B in my skin is a risk. I would like for that not to be a risk. So the question is what actions, what things can I do? What steps can I take to minimize the current risks that I'm in and that I've been in since I was born into this body, into this white supremacist society? So that's kind of like my thing about risk. And I think for the students, I'm mentioning that because academia in particular is a place to take the kinds of intellectual risks that will get us to a place that we're not at right now. So if you don't like your class, part of what you should be able to do in an academic space is use your mind, the questions that you have, the curiosities that you have, and the criticality that you bring from your experiences, and take the intellectual risk so that someone that's in your seat right now doesn't experience that same seat 10 years from now. And that's how I think about what I'm trying to do in academia. And I think that the three of us, this conversation exemplifies and is the consequence of risk that people took before us so that we could be here. So I think that that would be, I don't know if that's hopeful, but I guess for the students who pose that question, I'm a person who I failed my theory part of my comps when I was in graduate school, but I kept going and that sort of thing. I had lots of rejections from articles that people like, we don't understand. The content that's in my book, Stuck and Proven, got rejected from a bunch of journals. And then finally was like, you know what? The idea is too big for a journal article. Write a book. Somebody had to tell me that. And I thought that was risky, trying to write a book, as opposed to doing the traditional peer-reviewed publications and that sort of thing. Felt like a risk at the time. So my invitation is to take calculated risks, especially here at UIC. I think this is a place where we want to encourage that because it's necessary and needed to get us to another place.
Thank you. All right, we're running out of time, so I'm going to ask Sandra to share the slides again because I want to highlight your books. There was a question about, I would love to read some of your books. What is one book that each of you can suggest us to read? So here are books that Dr. Irby and Dr. Morton have written. And maybe they can type some suggestions in the chat while I'm going over a couple more slides that highlight their work. We're going to go a little over. If you have to leave, we understand. We do try to keep this for an hour, but we probably should have scheduled this conversation for a couple hours. So, so Sandra, if you can go to the next slide, please. So Dakota's Magical Black Tears book, he wrote as a children's book, and then it became an exhibit at a museum in Milwaukee. And I know that it can also go to other cities. So I don't know, Dakota, if you wouldn't mind just taking a minute, talking a little bit about what influenced your development of writing that children's book and the development of the exhibit in Milwaukee.
Yeah, so the backstory is that I actually had a dream that eventually became the book. It was about a police-involved shooting when I was in Milwaukee, and it was kind of like a nightmare. So it came to my mind, and I woke up, I jotted down the ideas, I sketched them out, and then years later, fast forward to 2020, this was in 2015, I believe. Fast forward to 2020, I am a father to two young children trying to figure out what is happening with the protests. So I started reading the paper with them, and this story came back to mind, and I did the book in large part to help my children understand the power of protest and direct action for creating a more racially just world. And fast forward, my daughter and I are the ones who really worked on the book. And then eventually we made it into a traveling children's museum exhibition. That's called the Magical Black Tears Experience. And yeah, we just basically tried to create a world, for the hour and a half that children step into it, where they are the agents of change and that they understand the different tools and resources they have to create a more racially just world where they can be self-determined and try to create a space that works for them and for people who look like them. And so it was a really fun project. And I never thought that I would actually be doing it, but it was a really, really cool experience. And as you mentioned, we're working right now to find places around the country that would like to host the exhibition. I would love for it to come to Chicago too.
Great, thank you. And Dr. Morton has been working with the Erickson Institute and an effort for many years now on racial justice in early mathematics. And I was able to attend the first annual meeting this summer at the Erickson Institute. So this has been, I know, Dr. Morton, you started earlier in your career at community college, and now you're working and thinking about little kids. So I'm a grandmother of 4, so I especially appreciate this work of yours. I have another slide on the conference I'll get to. On the next slide is the Brothers Teaching Initiative. This is led by Dr. Irby, where he's identified with his team a vision where every Illinois child will learn from and with a male teacher of color at some point in their pre-K-12 school years. No, that does not happen now. And the mission of Brothers Teaching is to increase the number of certified male teachers of color who work in Illinois schools by providing 1, professional development, 2, mentoring, 3, technical assistance, and networking opportunities that support the recruitment, preparation, and retention of Black male teachers. So we're excited about that work. We thank our donors that are watching this that give towards the scholarship money. The infrastructure award that comes from the IMC Foundation has been, and then this year, through Dakota's leadership and with support from Myrna Holton, we're able to secure a state earmark for $500,000 to support Brothers Teaching and expanding it outside of UIC to other institutions. So we're excited about that work. And then we have Terrell's work. So there's some websites there and resources there. He's doing really fascinating work. He's also been working with our DeSabo Scholars Program here at UIC. So heavily engaged in the city and across our campus, in addition to his grants, which are having an impact nationally. So check out his work. And then I'm going to skip that one and talk about some recent College of Ed highlights. So the first one is, again, the first national meeting of racial justice in early math that was hosted this summer. And I know Dr. Morton is working with the team at Erickson to expand that and continue that effort. I was grateful I had the opportunity to attend and see these amazing conversations. And there's a lot of potential there if we want to dream big with where that could go. We also hosted this summer the Golden Apple Summer Scholar Institute. And so we brought 69 scholars and 8 staff here to our campus for 3 weeks. And these are 69 sophomores in college that are preparing to be future teachers across the state of Illinois at multiple institutions. So I was grateful to host there. And then less than, I think probably 2 weeks ago, we celebrated 20 years of the EDD program here in the College of Education. And it was a great night with more than 200 of our alumni. We've had 283 students that have completed their residency over the 20 years since 2004. And we've had 175 that have completed their EDD. And now we're to the point where in Chicago Public Schools, 1 in 5 Chicago Public Schools is led by a principal or assistant principal that was prepared in the EDD program at UIC. And then just last week, Dakota kicked off a conference that was co-hosted by the college, and that was led by Paul Zawitkowski in writing that proposal. It was fascinating about this assessment conference is they kicked it off with Dakota interviewing 5 Chicago public school students. The young man on the right is an 8th grader and the other 4 were high school students. And it was wonderful to hear their stories. Everybody talked about this throughout the entire conference, and the students were very powerful. So we need to invest more time in listening to the stories and experiences of people. And then this coming summer, we'll be hosting at UIC the Leading Race Conscious School Improvement. It's a 3-day opportunity, professional development opportunity for leaders. And Dr. Allen and Dr. Lack and Dr. Irby and Dr. Salisbury are leading that effort. So we're excited about that. Teach Chicago Tomorrow. So this year, CPS, Chicago Public Schools, expanded that to include the opportunity for UIC to play. And so we have our first cohort of 21 undergraduate students that want to be teachers that came from Chicago Public Schools as part of Teach Chicago Tomorrow. And you see one young man here who's one of that cohort, and he's also a Brothers Teaching. And he also, this picture is of the study abroad experience in Costa Rica in August. So we're thrilled to have him here at UIC and preparing to be a teacher. There you see some study abroad photos from Costa Rica and from Brazil. We have a donor, a couple that has provided scholarships for our students. Many of our students are the first in their families to go to college, and they don't necessarily expect to study abroad while they're in college because they're working and doing other responsibilities. And so those scholarships help quite a bit to provide those types of experiences and unique opportunities for them. And I shout out to our college student ambassadors, and one of them in the middle is in our class, graduated and is now in our master's program in higher education, and in Dr. Maria Luna Duarte's class that's on with us tonight. And they're doing great work in our college, helping us think about the student experience, student engagement, and the needs of the students, and designing new initiatives. We have a new scholarship that's just moved to the college this month, and we're so grateful that it'll provide and support students in early childhood education and special education who receive an endorsement in bilingual education or English as a second language. So we want to thank Dr. Asaf Keller for establishing that scholarship in the College of Education. And also, we had our first recipient of the Hesa Bouchard Ferreira Scholarship. Gabriella's in the photo here, a new scholarship that was also established this year. So thank you to our donors that are investing in our students with scholarships. And Jasmine Jones, I don't know if Jasmine logged on tonight, but there are only 2 National Academy of Education Spencer Dissertation Fellows at UIC this year, and one of them is in the Curriculum and Instruction Department at UIC and the Math and Science Education. So congratulations to Jasmine. And I think we're running out of time, so I'm not going to do the rest of my slides. You'll have to show up next time if you want to hear more what's going on in the college. But I just want to thank, first of all, our scholars, our experts for engaging in this really powerful conversation. I hope you'll check out their work. I hope you'll continue to engage with us. And we want to dream big, so if you want to dream big with us, please reach out. We're looking for anybody who wants to build a building. So again, thanks so much for joining us tonight, and it was great interacting. And thanks for telling your personal stories. I know that's not always something people are willing to do in a public space like this, so much appreciated. And I get the opportunity to have the best job in the world to work with you. So thank you so much, and have a great night. See you all soon.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you. See ya, Dean Chval.